Serious, former convicts of Reddit, what did happen to pedophiles in prison? I've always heard people say things like, and you know what happens to child abusers in prison, and now I'm, morbidly, curious to hear any first-hand accounts. I was just in a high-security felony wing of jail waiting for extradition to another state, not in prison at the time. Well, the few that came in were told to go to SAG or get their freaking heads busted every day till they did. The one dude came in and refused to leave, was yelled at, spit on, and threatened until everyone had enough. 3 dudes ran up in his cell and threw him the most vicious beating you can imagine. I remember him crawling out of his cell and the dude pulling him back in for more. I could hear the bones breaking from 20 feet away. He died on the way to the hospital. All the guys that took part were there on murder beefs anyway, so the extra 5 years they got was worth it to them. This was an extreme case as the jail was overpopulated and they tried to sneak the chamos in Gen Pop because SEG was full. Everywhere else I was incarcerated they keep the touchers far away from us. How do the rest of the inmates find out a person is a child molester? Do the chamos, new word I learned today, ever try to lie about what they did in order to be more accepted? Here in Canada, they are given their own, well, prison basically. They are not put in with the regular people. Kingston Pen used to be the main one in Canada for chamos and other sex offenders until it closed a couple of years ago. Now they're spread around. Warkworth is near my city, is a medium or low security and has a bunch of sex offenders. I was in a federal detention center, FDC, for about a year, due to a minor related sex offense, so yes, I'm a chamo. The makeup of FDCs is somewhat unique. They're only for short-term, under 2-year, stays. Additionally, the whole place is broken up into tiny, 60 to 120 person, units. Unlike at a regular prison, you don't get to leave your unit except for work, school, law library or religious service. I guess this makes the power of the prison gangs much smaller. I promptly lost my paperwork immediately upon entering and made up some stuff about credit card fraud. No one ever demanded my papers. A couple of people asked and were okay when I said I'd lost it. There was this old man in for kiddie porn and no one really bothered him, but it was social suicide to be seen with him. There was a second guy in my unit who was in for kiddie porn that also managed to dupe everyone about what he was in for. In contrast to the old man, there was a younger guy who came to our unit. People found out it was a so kind of offense, and heaps the same day. I was in HDSP for some time due to a drug crime. I ran with the Pesa car, Hispanic non-gang related, cartel members okay. Upon entering while in the fish tank 30 days in your cell with a cellie, you see a caseworker who asks you if you want to hit GP, general population, or protective custody. Here you can choose, if you're stupid, molested a child and select GP. The moment your stay in the fish tank is over you are moved to the level 3 yard. Once in level 3 your cellie will ask you your PSI. Pre-sentence investigation report. This will have your crime and if you talk to the cops act. This paperwork will be handed over to the keyholder, the leader of the car. If you're clean, no issue. If your paperwork is dirty for molesting a child etc., they will tell you it's okay, we all make mistakes act. In the background we are planning to take you out. For us it was either pay the Southsiders to clean our mess or we can keep it within the Pesa car. HDSP is in the desert and the yard is covered in rocks. We would wait until chow time. Dinner during winter. Breakfast during summer. When we had cover of darkness walking to the chow hall we would have pre-planted a special rock. Nearing said rock the line would lose its form and the selected person picks up said rock and slams it against the person's head as hard as possible. Normally person would drop, bleed and we continue as nothing happened, throwing away used rock. If the person would not drop back, 1 and 2 would either start beating up the person. Really depends on how bad they had intercourse up. If it was a true fornicate up, a shank would be used. In 2 years only saw this happen 2 times, none by the Paisas but by the Southsiders. I did 6 months in CFCF, didn't even make it to Gen Pop before 2 big butt motherfuckers from the same street found out that some Asian dude was in for touching his niece. This guy, my god, they approached him at lunch and snatched away his tray first. The bigger of the 2 slapped him so freaking hard it almost hurt me while screaming, "So you like to hurt little girls?" Followed up by the man who took the tray hitting this little Asian guy with a straight up sucker punch that laid him out flat. After that I'm pretty sure every inmate on C block stopped his head. COs had pepper spray flying everywhere, and when all was said and done the pedo was taken to the hospital and the rest of us didn't get dinner because we were locked down for 24 hours. That was only quarantine. The whole thing could have been avoided if there wasn't a giant whiteboard with everyone's name. inmate number, and charges written all over it. If there wasn't a giant whiteboard with everyone's name, inmate number, and charges written all over it. Poop. My bunkie used to throw D-sized batteries at him. Or do people like him get D-cells? I was a holdover once and was only locked up for 25 out the 30 days I was given. Since I wasn't threat, I was moved after the first day to a more suitable pod. I remember they didn't let them watch TV or join any activity. The majority of inmates in the pod I was in had served most of their time and were getting out soon or being transferred back to Canada. Or Native American guys that got locked up on the reservation. So they get treated like Rudolph. Ex of mine went to prison in Brazil. Said an offender came in after he was processed. Both the inmates and the guards dressed him in a dress, wig, put lipstick on him, put out cigarettes on him, and beat the crap out of him. Didn't know if he made it or not. Probably true. A family member spent a few months for gun-related charges back in 2004, in the Presidio Central de Porto Alegre. He said it's pretty much heck on earth. I've read this whole thread. Jared Fogle is going to take a shit within 5 minutes, isn't he? It's not looking good for our old friend, Jared. He's going to more than likely get a foot long and then a severe butt beating. Had a friend who was a guard at a prison in Sydney, Australia. The rock spiders, as they called child molesters, were considered to be at risk from other inmates, so not included with the general prison populace. There were special units that they were kept in for their safety. A prison within a prison within a prison. I work in a medium security state prison, and the short answer is nothing. Most COs are not allowed access to inmate records, and the ones who are don't usually spread it for fear of doing the paperwork involved with a stabbing. In our facility, inmates who act properly get a room to themselves, and this is by far the biggest deterrent to any misbehaving. Also, the saying here is, in prison you can be whoever you want. Many openly lie for fear of retaliation. In the rare case where the info gets out, they will be shunned by groups they don't really affiliate with anyhow. They most often find a level of acceptance with the many religious groups inside. Also, in my facility, rape is almost unheard of. The sex there is almost entirely consensual, to the point of evenly distributing the punks amongst the blocks. There's no way we'll know which of these stories are true, exaggerated, hearsay, or completely false, but goddarn, this topic is still terrifying as heck. That's pretty much where my mind is at. I was locked up for a month in Cook County Jail. As soon as we hit the bullpens, people were already talking about who is a child molester. When going to court, the officer would call us up for our date. I looked on the officer's desk and he had spread out all of our court cards. I looked at one guy's and he was in for protective custody. I knew it would not end well for him. Come to find out, the guy's brother was killed in front of him and he had a warrant, but someone along the process decided to put him PC with the other inmates. I was in different prisons from minimum to maximum. Where I live, it's a hate crime to assault them for their crime. The prison I did most of my time in had 1,200 inmates, 900 of whom were sex offenders. You couldn't make it through breakfast without seeing hundreds of those sexual act. It was terrible. The Bible study leader had intercourse as kids. Was not a good time. Do not recommend. 5 stars. There was a child killer molester, Joseph Cornelius, in the same block of the same prison I was in, called TWP, in Pennsylvania. He had cut a 9-year-old's male genitalia off and killed him under a bridge in Pittsburgh. He tried to live in the general population for a couple days but had an apple thrown at his face from close range. He opted for the protective custody after that. Peace. I was in prison for a marijuana conviction, right alongside monsters like him. How messed up is that? I was in county for 2 months. I second what people have said already. I don't know how, but word gets around that you are a chummo. I think it's either TV, these are generally high profile, or getting one of your people on the outside to look individuals up on the jail clerk of court's website to see what they are charged with. I saw one guy who was charged as a chummo, who later was found not guilty. Poor guy, suffering like this and you didn't even do anything. Inmates threw poop at him. Threw urine at him. Yell at him all night long. Just make his life miserable. Can a guy get by in prison without joining a gang inside? Like, just keep his head down? Is he bound to get picked up and forced to join, or will he just get beat on and killed? Okay, what about dudes busted for kiddie porn? About 2.5 years ago, we had a SWAT raid on our house. My roommate, who I thought was an awesome stand-up guy, pillar of the community type that I trusted and considered a good friend, turned out to be a part of a major ring of child porn across the state. He wasn't making it, just trading it. Ended up getting charged with 5 counts of unlawful possession of materials depicting sexual performance by a child young, too, as one of the SWAT cops told us after they hauled him off. "This ain't I swear officer, I thought she was legal poop. The majority of it was under 10, some as young as 2 to 3. Sadly, because he wasn't the kingpin of this ring, because he never made it or sold it, and we're pretty sure he rolled over on someone gave up names, they only gave him 2 years in prison." The first day I was in general population, I got to my bunk and found I knew most of the people in there from high school. I decided to take a nap since I hadn't been able to sleep for a few days when I was on suicide watch. I awoke to 2 guys getting their butts beat by I think 8 guys. COs came in and asked what happened and asked me who was involved. Of course I said I didn't see poop. They eventually found out who some of the people were and hauled all of them to SEG. I never saw those 2 guys again, but the others were eventually brought back. One of the guys was in there for freaking a 14-year-old, he was 26, in a public park, and the other was just helping out his friend. I was kind of scared for my own safety because I was accused of first-degree attempted murder and abuse of a child under 12 because my daughter had what doctors diagnosed as shaken baby syndrome. I was proved innocent a few months later though. What seems to be taken for granted, and I just can't wrap my head around, is, why are sex offenders perceived as special by other inmates? To begin with, why are they viewed as more punishable than, say, murderers? And most of all, do other criminals really feel like they have a moral high ground over a particular group like sex offenders? They have a moral compass that says, what I did was somewhat okay. But these guys, I must avenge their victims. I am not trying to defend, but to understand this peculiarity. My husband went to prison for growing some pot and saw child molesters and sex offenders get beaten half to death on the regular. If you rape a child, you're going to be treated like poop for the rest of your pathetic life. I think tax evasion, growing weed, and things of that nature are far less severe than raping an infant, and they absolutely deserve to be punished much more harshly for their crime. If they ever came out of their cells, which they hardly ever did, we would take all of his food, his covers and pillow if he had one. We took everything he owned but the cloths on his person. We would take every tray of food if we were able to get to it. They were raped, not by me, beaten a lot and daily, made into everyone's slave on the pod. If you needed your cloths washed, or if some homosexual dude wanted a sexual act, the pedo was forced into doing it, as well as whatever else we could think up. One time we made one get a tattoo of a male genitalia on his forehead with balls tattooed on each side of his face near his mouth. As well as tattooed "I'm a female dog" on his face. In prison, calling someone a female dog is the worst thing you could do when it came to calling someone a name. It's enough to get into a fight for your life over. Is there any way to find out how a certain inmate died? Is there any way to talk to his or cellmate and see if they talked about what they did? Look up a death certificate, same as anyone else. I did 6 months at county. Word got out, and in this place at least they were given a choice: get PCD up or get your butt beat constantly. They all chose PC. Just spent a year in TDCJ, Texas, prison system. Most chamos, child molesters, had it easier than others as the state protects those pieces of poop from other inmates. My first cellmate for my first 31 days was a 50-year-old man doing 40 years for raping a 4-year-old girl. Nobody knew his case until about 3 days before I caught chained to another unit. As soon as I found out, I went through his poop, found a few weapons under his mat, sock full of dominoes and a razor handle with blade tied with string. He was one of the only inmates I saw the guards allow to leave the dorm when he wanted, because he would tell them he didn't feel safe. It took everything in me not to kick his teeth in the night I left that piece of poop unit. From my experience, they have it easy in prison. If you're caught assaulting a chamo for his crime, they basically charge you with a free world case of retaliation. Other than that, most chamos are housed together for protection. Other than that, I never ran across any at other units in the year I spent. Most are forced into SEG or protective custody before anything can happen. I spent a lot of my teen years in and out of boot camps, juvenile halls. You're not allowed to speak about the crime that brought you to the facility, but we all did, and you would know if the dude was a pedo or rapist artist if they didn't tell you, or the way that acted. At one facility I spent most of my time, 2 years. I got good with the guards and they would tell us what was up with new ones' gims. One dude was proud of beating a little boy after raping his older sister, and that dude only lasted a month before he got splinters up his butt via a mob handle. But most were just picked on. Now when I say picked on, I mean getting urinated on or spit on or light beatings. Most guards turned a blind eye to all this. When I was in, I remember one kid came in and I was his mentor, so I had to show him how to act. Spent 9 months before the test came back that he didn't even do it. So this is pretty disgusting. There is basically no effort at all to rehabilitate people in US prisons? Isn't this threat alone the #1 motivation to reform the US prison system? You raped a 5-year-old girl and beat her and terrorized her so she wouldn't tell. You don't deserve to be rehabilitated.